Jonah Jenkins.
How are you, Steve?
Glad to have you on the show. I know I've been trying to get you on for a long time. But you waited till something happened, and now I know why. Because you had reissues and stuff.
Sure.
Um, Before we talk about Only Living Witness and all that, I just wanted to talk to you about, your early days. Now, I read somewhere that you grew up in Cambridge and in New Hampshire. What does that mean? Did you start in one of those places and move to? I'm thinking you started in New Hampshire.
So my mom, she grew up in Westboro, Mass, and we moved to Cambridge when I was really little. She moved here because of basically activism, and she worked with the Women's Center here when they were just getting started, as an activist and helping them, with logistics and stuff, and also as a client. She was a single mom and she needed help, and Cambridge was a good place to get those services,
Yeah.
especially when you're fighting for, women's rights back then. The group of people that wrote Our Bodies Ourselves, that kind of scene. That's what she was a part of. So eventually we moved to New Hampshire, and she met my stepdad up there, and I spent, until I was like 21 up there, and then I moved down to Boston around 91.
So were you born in Westboro or were you born in Cambridge?
I was actually born in New Haven. That's where my
Oh,
my dad, yeah, my biological father was studying Johnson at Wales, and so they lived down there for a bit.
oh, okay, okay. But your teenage years were New Hampshire?
Yeah, definitely New
Whereabouts in New
Hampshire.
Hampshire?
So I grew up in Hudson and Litchfield. I would say kind of split between the two. That's basically just across the river from Nashua,
Oh,
and just
okay.
yeah, just south of Manchester. Litchfield is a mile wide, about 14 miles long. It's a sort of a small, mostly failed farming community. That when I was living there, they didn't even have their own high school, so it was pretty small back then. And I went to high school in Hudson because they kind of took in a lot of the smaller towns students, and they had a big farm program there for like all the farming kids.
It sounds like it could be New Hampshire.
Yeah, totally.
So when you were a teenager, um, did you start listening to music at a young age?
Yeah, my parents always had music playing, and it was like, they actually had a custom van with an 8-track player, so it was everything
Mm.
from, like Heart and the Cars, and they probably listened to a lot of Dead and Sabbath and tons of Beatles. It was like always really melodic stuff. My mom was a vocalist, and they always sang it like in church groups and stuff like that. And that's actually, of course, where I started to sing, was when they took me to church, and they were like, "Oh, why don't you just start singing too?" Okay, well,
Oh,
let's try it.
wow.
But
So was
fortunately,
any of that music that they were playing, affecting you in a way where you became interested in it?
I mean, yeah, they were always playing stuff in the car that we sang along to. I mean, I sang so many ABBA songs as a kid just because it's super catchy, like you can't get away from
Yeah.
it. And then, it helped to give me an identity because my mom was also friends with like the Modern Lovers and stuff like that. So she's like, back then she was really close friends with Jonathan. So I went like the very first time I ever smelled pot, I was at a Modern Lovers practice, and
Wow.
I specifically remember it. It was like I was probably 3, 4 years old, maybe, and yeah, it was a cool scene that she was a part of.
That's
Um,
interesting. She worked with the Modern Lovers.
yeah,
That's fantastic.
yeah,
So you met Jonathan Richman when you were a little kid.
totally. Yep. I actually have a postcard on my fridge right now because my mom was like, "Oh, you have to reach out to Jonathan," and I got a postcard basically that said, "I'll write you a postcard, but I don't have Facebook, and that's about it." Like we
I
can write
believe
letters if you
that.
want. Totally,
He's
and
a
it was just
pretty he's a
it's right in
pretty
line with what
different. Yeah, he's different. He's definitely
yeah.
different. But
He's awesome.
I love the Modern Lovers. I mean,
Oh,
a
me too, man.
lot
Me
of their
too.
stuff is so good and it just passed the test of time. And
Without
whenever
question.
whenever he shows up in a movie or somewhere, you know it's him. The voice
It's the best.
is uncomparable.
Yeah.
Did you actually remember their music?
Yeah, I mean, that's a lot of the records that we listened to as a kid. Like my mom, I remember my mom playing like the Beatles' Michelle because it's the very first song I ever heard that was in another language, and I
Oh
was
yeah.
again probably like 4, maybe 5 years old or whatever. And yeah, all the Modern Lovers records definitely, and Jonathan Richman because so many of his songs are great kid songs, like Buzz 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 and
Yeah.
like uh, just he's got a bunch of songs that are very fitting for a kid to listen to, so that was always sung around our house.
That's interesting. Now, okay, I read somewhere that
Mhm.
you liked bands like, and I know I wrote these three down: Black Flag, COC, and Cryptic Slaughter. Cryptic
Sure.
Slaughter was an interesting one because I worked at Enigma Records when the
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Convicted album
Uh-huh.
came out on Death Metal Blade, and we
Yep.
did all the distribution and
Oh,
marketing.
nice.
So I knew.
Nice.
I didn't think very many people really knew about Cryptic Slaughter. They weren't exactly a household name.
Sure.
So how did you get into all that heavy music?
So as a teenager, I was, I mean, in grade school, whatever, I was always kind of just a nerdy kid that didn't really fit in. I had like a patch over one eye when I was very little. I had astigmatism and I had glasses. My name was Jonah, and I just got made fun of constantly. So I was always kind of an outcast. And music and art definitely like put me into another world, gave me a chance to get away from that stuff. I remember meeting one of he's my oldest friend that I have still, when we were both in fourth grade because my mom was teaching art outside in like our picnic tables in the yard, and we've
Wow.
just been friends ever since. And he and I actually kind of got into punk rock around the same time because we hung out with friends and we listened to all kinds of, I guess, very esoteric music for the time. We had friends that introduced us to like Throbbing Gristle and Psychic TV and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Um, and it ended up, I ended up shifting more towards punk rock. I think the first thing that we really saw, I think it was like Night Flight, right? So you had all these really cool movies that they would show on there. We saw Erga Music War, and Erga Music War, we watched it for like, not really for Talking Heads, but Talking Heads, we knew of them or whatever. We knew we loved the Police, like it was a huge mix of bands, like, and that's how we got into like Gang of Four and stuff. And and then we saw this band called the Dead Kennedys, and we're like, what's this? Like, that's so different. The guitars were so aggressive and stuff, and I didn't really understand the vocals at all. I was like, it's just a little too much for me. And I quickly learned that just get over that, Jonah, because you're getting into punk rock now. And it went from DK to Black Flag, Boston, not LA, Comp, like all this stuff that I got because a friend who I started skateboarding and stuff like that. He gave me a bunch of records that he had borrowed from a friend, and he's like, this punk rock stuff's not really my thing, but you might like this. And it had like Gigi Allen in there, and like, the Freeze, tons of 7 inches and 12 inches, and I just like was voracious, like learned everything I could. I still have some of those records because the original guy didn't want them back. I had to give a bunch of like the really good ones back, but like
You still have them?
I still have some of them. Yeah, like the first pressings of like Minor Threat, both Minor Threat records. I still
Oh,
have.
that's
Yeah.
that could increase your bank account if you ever need
Well,
money.
I played the hell out of it. I don't collect for anything except to listen to it, right? So most of my
Right.
records are pretty beat, but whatever, that's cool. But yeah, like I really loved all the stuff I heard, and then we like instantly just started reading fanzines and everything, and it got us into all the different facets of underground and what really was truly independent music back then. And we would come into Boston, go to the stores, and just pour over everything. And Rocket Records in Nashua was really a great
Oh,
jumping off point too. And
yeah.
Dale actually introduced us to tons of stuff. I remember asking Dale, I was like, "Hey man, I really love this Misfits stuff. Like I loved Earth AD so much. Was there anything that is even remotely similar?" He's like, well, I mean, if you like those melodic, like whoa, whoa vocals, you should try this Naked Raygun stuff. I was like, oh, okay, let me check out Naked Raygun. So like, and then from there we got into more and more just branching out. Like I loved Straw Dogs, and I didn't even know about FSU. Sorry, FSU. FUs. The FUs like got me into like more melodic,
You
but also
wish you
then,
didn't know about FSU.
I mean, I don't want to talk shit, but like
Joke, joke. Please don't come after me, anyone. It
yeah.
was a joke.
Yeah, but like the FU stuff, like it brought me okay through the melodicism, just like Misfits. You have this melodicism, and I love Bad Brains too because it was melodic, and it brought me into like a really cool. All right, now it's going to bring you right back to your original like love of the stuff you heard on Boston, not LA, right? Because they weren't really melodic back then, but I could understand. Now there was a huge swath of stuff that really was melodic and aggressive and heavy, and that got me into heavier and heavier stuff. So I just wanted things as fast as possible. So getting back to the original question, that's how I get into stuff like COC, DRI, Cryptic Slaughter, and then into more and more metal stuff. Like I remember buying the Formicide demo because I wanted stuff that sounded like SOD, and Dale was like, "Oh, well, if you like SOD, then you probably like this Formicide demo." And I bought it, and then I wore it out, and I bought it again. I remember going to see them live, like, and I was like, "Oh, there's an underground metal scene too. That's pretty awesome too." So we just kept digging and digging, and eventually, I was doing a fanzine up there. I became an independent music buyer in Nashua, and I was buying a bunch of stuff on Earache because I love Napalm Death and just anything that was fast and heavy. And all that stuff was coming to us without any plastic on it. They didn't wrap their cassettes. So I could just pull it off the wall and play it for people, and I would instantly sell it because I knew the people that wanted to hear that stuff. And they were like, "Oh my God, Carcass? What is this?
Wait a minute,
What
you
is
started working at Rocket?
No, not at Rocket. It was actually a big city. So it was right down the road
Okay.
in Seminole Plaza.
Oh,
So
wow.
yeah. And the guy that ran that place, Phil, he was actually very nice. He's like, I mean, I don't know that stuff. Why don't you just put some stuff on the wall and see if it sells? And yeah, man, we sold a ton of it because I could play a lot of that stuff. And then I would, even do stuff like on Shinekey, a lot of like roots reggae and
Oh, yeah.
stuff like that. And when you can prove to people that you have an idea of what you're talking about, started a fanzine around the same time, then they'll kind of listen to you for other purchases. You know?
I'm going to ask you about Look again because I know you had that fantasy, but I want to go back to what you were saying. So I'm thinking if you got into the Straw Dogs, because
Yeah,
I worked on their records at Enigma. A lot of
yeah.
the bands you mentioned, it's like it's
Yeah.
really weird how I worked with all those bands, but not weird, but it's a good connection that we have here. Um, so I'm thinking this must have been 86, 87.
So I started getting into stuff. 86 is probably when I went to see my first show in Boston, right? Or it was actually Waltham. It was Circle Jerks and Slapshot at Brandeis. Uh,
Wow.
Slapshot moving targets actually in Circle Jerks. So, but like I remember Lloyd from Eye for an Eye he did a stage dive and then he carried him on a stretcher because he hurt his neck or back or something like that. That was bad. But it was a like mind blowing show. Like all the big skinheads were there. I was a tiny little kid. They're throwing me around. They're like, "Hey, kid, don't do that." Whatever. If I was just being an idiot, and I learned a lot from that stuff. But 86 was definitely a turning point for me as far as things changing. It wasn't the old school hardcore anymore, even though I love that stuff too. It was changing into something more melodic, something more multifaceted.
It's
Even like,
crossing over. Yeah.
yeah, but even Dag Nasty, right? So they weren't really crossing over, but they were changing quite a bit from the first record and stuff. And all the guys in Minor Threat kind of breaking out. And I mean, dude joins the Meatmen. What? Minor Threat to the Meatmen? And of course, Meatmen were also a big
Brian
thing. Then,
Baker. Yeah.
yeah, and then they did like kind of more rock and roll. It wasn't hardcore anymore. It was just a weird time.
80s were great, man. You
Mhm.
picked a really good period to get into it. I'm a couple years older than you, so I was around, in the early 80s for the
Yeah.
original hardcore scene. But that second wave that started, you mentioned Dag Nasty and those bands. It's funny. I'll tell you something that I don't know, I may have told you this, or you may have heard it, but I wasn't in favor of the Straw Dogs changing their name because
Understood.
I put the deal together and I
Yeah.
wanted them to stay the FUs, but they won the argument, obviously, and changed their
Yeah.
name. But they
Yeah.
went back. They went back to
Yeah.
the FUs. But Steve Martin was in the band, so he was
Oh yeah.
he was the Straw Dog
Got it. Got
in
it.
that band. So, look again. I knew about your fanzine, but I never saw a copy. I don't think maybe I
Oh.
did back then, but I don't remember. Was it all like punk and hardcore, or was it metal? I mean, what were you writing about in the fanzine?
It's a big mix of stuff, and it was purposefully all over the place, but we did focus on underground punk, metal, hardcore. The whole ethos was it doesn't suck, you just don't like it. We were trying to expose people to things that they weren't used to, that was a little bit off what might be on your normal playlist, but it was also we tried to tie it together to say, here's why we love this thing. So when we had a playlist, it was very eclectic. We had things like, Sade and the next to, Negative Approach and stuff on there, like
Oh, okay. Did you ever interview bands, or did you just write
yeah.
reviews?
Yeah, we had a bunch of interviews. I mean, in the fourth issue, which was the biggest one, we had a circulation of about 2,000 copies, and we interviewed like Stark Weather, Typo Negative, um, a bunch of bands. I mean, the first one was like Sacred Reich, um, Aversion, um, I forget who else, but yeah, I got the copies of it. I can send you the covers so you can pop it in here if you want. But
Yeah, yeah. I
yeah.
would love to see those. You met, was it Pete Steele that you
Oh
interviewed?
yeah. Yeah.
Oh, that's cool. I worked with Carnivore, so I got a good
Oh yeah.
taste of Pete before
Yeah.
Typo Negative.
Yeah.
He's a character. I've
Both.
told this story many times, but the first thing I said to him when I met him, when I was working at Roadrunner, he was a big dude. He
Of
looked
course.
right down on me, goes, if you fuck my record up, I'll kill you. That's what he said to me. I was like,
I
I
can
won't
see him
fuck it
saying
up. I
that.
promise.
Totally.
I promise I won't fuck it up. I
That's funny.
promise. Um, your first band was a band called Blind Surgeon. Is that correct?
Well, I joined that band. That wasn't actually my first band. The first band we did was just some friends with like a four track, and we did we it was called a graphic eulogy, and we loved stuff like we loved Big Black, but we also loved Laibach, we loved Throbbing Gristle, we loved I don't know, tons of stuff from back then that was just underground and weird, and we kind of
Yeah.
tied it all together and did this really crappy demo tape of just kind of, it wasn't first wave industrial, but it definitely wasn't the dance industrial stuff. It was intentionally rough and harsh. I mean, I'd compare it to more like Hunting Lodge type stuff, but we weren't nearly as good as Hunting Lodge. Like it was intentionally abrasive. And then, because none of us could play instruments, it was easy to just have a drum machine and some samples and noises or whatever, cool pedal stuff.
Did you play
But
out with that band?
no, we never played any shows. We just did like in the bedroom, four track, mixes. But yeah, so I used to go to shows, and I would always, like, bands I liked, I would dance a lot, and I'd jump all over the place and do all kinds of crazy stuff. And the Blind Surgeon guys saw me at one of their shows enjoying them, and it was like, I'm sure it was Blind Surgeon and Formicide. I think it might have even been up in Manchester or something like that. And or maybe that was Framingham. I forget. Anyway, but so, like, it was a chance for them to change vocalists, and they were like, we're not vibing on this guy's sound. We want to try something different. Would you try come down to the practice space? And I just went down and yelled my head off, and I they liked it, and so they were like, okay, we have a demo that doesn't have vocals on it, and we want to have a new vocalist on there. So would you record your singing on there? So we did that, and it was called, the name of the demo was A Welcome Change. Well, I didn't like the band name to begin with, and that's actually why I ended up leaving. But that's why the demo really never got an official release, because we had just difference of opinion about the band name. A couple
I,
guys had it tattooed on their arm, and they're like, "No, we're sticking with it." And I'm like, "Okay, well, I'm not."
you keep mentioning Formicide. Eric Stevenson was in
Yeah,
Formicide, right? Kevin too,
yeah.
or just Eric? Kevin
It
and
was
Eric?
Kevin and Eric, yep, and Roy Costa. So those three guys, that's how we formed
That's your band.
only the Witness, yeah. And it was
Yeah.
very similar to the Blind Surgeon thing, because played in the tape. They liked the vocals. Actually, a friend of ours played the tape for them first, Steve Iverson, who was in hearing impaired back then, and he had a radio show down at JUL. That's how we became friends. Because JUL made it up to Boston better than most of the Boston stations. Made it up to New Hampshire better than the Boston stations did. But anyway, so he played the tape for those guys, and then, like, they asked me to come over to just to hang out. I talked to Eric for like hours on the phone about bands we liked. I was trying to get him to listen to like Cro-Mags and Leeway, and he's like, "Yeah, well, you need to listen to Holy Terror." I was like, "I do like Holy Terror." He's like, "I like Dark Angel." I was like, "I love Dark Angel." And then, we just started to share. He knew that I did the fanzine and stuff too, and I'd written about his band. I was really psyched on Formicide, so I couldn't say enough good things about them. But yeah, so we then Only the Witness started around 19 late 89, maybe early 90.
I went back and listened to all the stuff in the last week, and it's way more metal than I thought it was. I used to think you guys were more, leaning towards hardcore, but now when I hear it, this is a metal band. So I
Uh-huh.
mean, that's just my opinion of what
You mean the
I.
later stuff, the later Witness
Yeah,
stuff?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. Why earlier was it more punk?
Well, it was definitely more stripped down because we only had an 8 track to record on, right? So we when like that's how we got a song on the it was John Regan's comp, but it came out on Tang eventually. It was, it was supposed to come out in like 1990, and it came out in 95, I think. But so I think we were even broken up by the time it actually got released. But the first stuff, like Bad Blood, is total hardcore song. It's just straightforward, fast, and it has a breakdown at the end. That's it.
Yeah, I forgot about that. Yeah,
Yeah.
okay. So
So
it
we had a
was
seven
really
inch.
more hardcore sounding at the beginning, but it became more metal. Um, Tell me about how, when you guys started playing, how you ended up getting a buzz, where it led to like Century Media discovering you guys.
Well, fortunately, the first demo sold pretty well. It had 4 songs on it, and then 3 of them came out as a 7 inch, and it was the 7 inch was put up by the guy that I did Look Again with, so it was Look Again Records. And we just like handed them out mainly like to friends at shows and
That's going to
stuff.
be hard to find.
It's not that. I mean, they made like 1,000, so it's not that rare.
Oh,
But
okay.
yeah, but yeah, so we'd go to shows at the channel or whatever. I even brought them to when I went to shows in New York and handed them out to people and stuff. And then when the sound changed because we changed a couple members, we got Craig and Craig Silverman and Chris on bass. We Chris Crowley on bass. We ended up changing the sound so much that we wanted to do a new demo anyway. We still played some of those old stuff, all the old stuff basically, but we had a real stylistic shift. And Eric intentionally wanted to slow things down, make it a little bit more, straightforward, which ended up being very metal, but I didn't mind that either. I loved heavy stuff. In fact, it didn't get heavy enough for me. I wanted it to sound like Bolt Thrower, and they were just kind of like, that's a little too much. But because we all wanted it to be melodic too.
Yeah.
Um, and so then we recorded a demo. We recorded a Barking Spider, which is out in like Central Mass. And that's actually the first time I worked on any board that had any digital memory in it. So it could actually record, not just tape, but it had like a digital, like basically a little hard drive in there. So you could record something. So we used it actually for the first time. I was like, oh, wow, that's really awesome. And then everything went digital after that, obviously. But so
Where
we
in
did,
Central Mass was that studio?
I don't remember. I could have to look it up. It's in the
It's
demo.
okay. Not
Yeah,
important.
but Barking Spider was the name of the studio. So then that demo, we needed someone to help us press it. And when I worked at another record store down in Chelmsford, it was Slip Disc Records. The guy who ran that, whose name was Ron Crawford, really supportive. And he's like, well, why don't I just press some? I know you, like when you worked at my store and the other demo came out, we sold a bunch of those. Why don't we just do the other demo and, we'll see if we can sell them. And we sold through, 500 copies really quickly.
Wow.
So we pressed another 500 and we were like, all right, this is going pretty well. We started getting shows down in, at the channel and stuff like that after initially our first show was in JP. First show in Boston was in JP for Sean McNally, and we got paid $12 because 12 people came. Like
Wow,
uh
Sean was fair back then too. $1 per. That's good.
he was awesome. He was always just a really, really good dude. I mean, what was it to get in there? Maybe like $4 or $5 tops. It was nothing, right? Especially Green Street Station. But yeah, so and it's funny because I gave Sean the Sam Black Church demo because we had it from trading tapes and stuff like that. I got it from my friend John Sandler, who actually runs Village Vinyl up in Brookline. And we had been working on the fanzine together. So I gave Sean the Sam Black Church demo. He had never heard them before, and then he became their manager after that. But
Right.
so back to Witness, the show started getting better. We sold a lot of demos, and then we sent them out to certain labels and zines and stuff. A couple people wanted to put us on compilations. We got, I think we were supposed to be on 3 different compilations, and only one of those ended up coming out because Century Media shut it down when they signed us. They were like, no, we don't want those songs to get out. So we did end up recording all the songs from the demo plus a few more for the album, the first album in '92.
I'd heard about you guys, but I was in California, so I didn't see you. Well, I'm curious, when you worked with Century Media, was either Paula Hogan or Bill Polisi there?
Definitely Paula. Yeah, she was our biggest champion. She
I
was
love
so amazing.
Paula.
She's
Love her.
incredible. Yeah, brilliant and just kind, and she really worked hard. And we wouldn't have like we got some charting because of it, foundations and stuff. CMJ. She worked it like really hard, and she also kind of helped us to lobby the label to do a video, which we spent $300 on the video, and it
Slug.
actually,
Slug
yeah,
video? Yeah.
yeah. When we'd actually made it onto MTV because we had some fans that worked like in the news section there. And it's funny, we tried to ask for the money to put back into our bank account for the $300 we spent from Century Media. They're like, no, we're not paying for that.
Yes. They've become quite a bigger company now than
That's
they
for
were
sure.
back
Yeah.
then. I remember when they first came from Germany or wherever they
Yeah.
were from, because
Yeah.
Paula and
Dortmund.
Billy
Yeah.
worked with me at Giant Records, and I knew Paula because she was just on the scene. And I
Yeah.
think she went to mechanic after that, or
She
and
did.
that,
Yeah. Hmm.
yeah. But I kind of skipped a part of the story here.
Hmm.
Tim O'Hare.
Yeah.
Okay. That was the first big studio that you worked with?
Yeah.
Fort
Yeah.
Apache.
Absolutely.
How
Fort
did that
Apache.
all
Yeah.
come together? Did Century Media help that happen, or did you guys?
No. Century Media didn't even really know about them. Century Media was in Dortmund at the time, in Germany, and they mostly knew death metal and stuff like that. When I first went over to meet Robert, just to he brought me over for like press tour. I did press in Europe for mostly Germany, but for 2 weeks I got driven around and just do interviews and stuff. And he was like the thing he was most excited about beyond death metal at the time was what was happening in New Orleans. So he was about to sign I Hate God, and I had already known those guys from my friend in Paris who had put out their first record on Intellectual Convulsion. And again, this is all tape trading, fanzine stuff. And he's like, "Do you think I should keep going with the New Orleans stuff?" I was like, "Are you kidding me? That stuff's amazing. I can't." Yes, absolutely. So he ended up doing a bunch of that stuff, especially the I Hate God. He did like Graveyard Rodeo and stuff. But long story short, it was like Century Media did not know about where we should record, and they didn't really have a strong opinions about where to record. But Eric was a big fan of the Fort Apache stuff. Like he liked a lot of the more, I guess, I don't want to say indie rock, but what would you call it, right? It's rock and roll and it's all independent, but you know,
Alternative is what they
yeah,
called it back then.
sure, sure. And we all knew it from like Slapshot and stuff, and I didn't know Tim before that, but Tim was the guy that we ended up connecting with, and like everybody in that studio were just awesome people. And Tim was funny. I remember he would always be kind of making fun of the fact that we're so metal and stuff, and it's sounding anyway. And he'd be like, "Yeah, well, so I mean, like, what do you want to sound like, And I'm like, "What do you mean?" It's like, "You personally, who's your favorite vocalist?" And I'm like, "Well, I mean, right now I've been listening to tons of Funhouse, so Iggy's voice on that is incredible." He's like, "Well, you're no Iggy Pop. Let's put it that way." I'm like, "Yeah, I know, I can't do that. There's no way. That's like legendary shit." But he was just funny. He was always like making sure everybody had, our heads firmly in the game, and just let's do a good recording, because we only had 10 days to record a mix, so got to get it done.
So you made Prone Mortal Form
Yep.
um, with Timo here. And then
Yep.
I think, were you guys already really happening in Boston, or did you, because I know you went and toured Europe. I mean, was the buzz bigger in Europe, or was it bigger here at that time?
Our shows in Boston were definitely bigger. We were able to draw more people. Our first big opportunity was when Bullet La Volta pulled out of a show. It was supposed to be us opening for Bullet La Volta with COC and Prong, and at the channel, and Bullet La Volta pulled out, so we got to play like an hour later. I think Sean probably put that show together, and he's like, "Oh, yeah, you get to play to more people because there's, the band dropped off." We're like, "Okay, cool." And it was like, it changed everything for us. Like everything, we sold way more tapes. We started selling a lot of shirts and stuff like that. Then we could start booking our own shows that we were headlining, Bunratty's 186, that kind of thing.
That's interesting. That tour you're talking about, I saw it in LA. I guess
Oh
it
yeah,
must have been the end, and then Bullet La Volta just got off it. That's weird that they pulled out in their hometown. Maybe it
it
was
is.
a illness or something, or
I have no idea. I was bummed because I wanted to see them, and I liked that they were the most raw band on there. Everyone else is a little bit more polished. This is the COC Blind record, so it's one of their most rock and roll at that point. And I loved that record. I remember meeting them and being like, I'm so happy that you made this record," and they were like, "Oh, okay, that's cool." Like this, I was a kid. I was 20, 22 or something.
yeah, those three bands right there were like really hot at that time. But
Totally.
none of them, well, Prong is with, they're still out there doing it. Tommy's going to probably
Yeah.
do it forever.
Yeah.
Now I wrote down Cro-Mags and Leeway, and I think I
Yep.
wrote that down because you might have toured with them.
Yeah, the first tour with Cro-Mags was in '93. And that's right when the album came out. We did like I want to say just over a month. And then the Leeway tour happened in '94, and that was about a month and a half.
Those are great bands to be touring with at that time.
It was it wasn't the greatest Cro-Mags record to tour with, because a lot of people were kind of like, that's not, it was we joked that it was the Cro-Mag because it was John Joseph, and then he had people filling in on the rest of the
Oh,
instruments.
Harley was gone at that
Yeah, he
point.
was not. Yeah, this is after Alpha Omega. They had a big falling out and stuff like that, and he wanted to just John Joseph wanted to go tour Europe, so he was kind of the figurehead. And they did play a bunch of older stuff, and it sounded great, but it was different than if we had been on Alpha Omega tour. That would have been bigger for us, but still, it
Yeah,
was awesome. It was like,
the intensity of
yeah,
is hard to
Harley,
match. Yeah,
yeah,
it's really hard
Harley's
to
Harley's
match.
a force live. Yeah, and
Um,
then the Leeway tour was '94. That was for Open Mouth Kiss. No, no, not Open Mouth
And
Kids. That
those
was
were
next one.
both in Europe, right?
Huh?
Both
It was
those tours were
both in
Europe.
Europe. Yeah, yeah. Sorry, it was for Adult Crash. So that was like basically their third Leeway's third record. And yeah, they treated us really well. AJ from Leeway had been playing guitar on the Cro-Mags tour, so he knew what we were like on tour. He's like, yeah, they can, they should join us again.
Was it because of financial restraints that you guys never really did a full US tour?
Yeah, we couldn't get any financial support from the label because we didn't give them our merchandising, and they had a full merchandising in Europe. So they were like, well, we literally didn't make any money off the merchandising in Europe. So we were we were hawking our posters for just to have some food when we came back. But yeah, so in the US it just didn't work out, and we couldn't afford it on our own. We toured a lot in the Northeast, but it wasn't really touring, mostly just we went as far north as Montreal, as far south as Philly, and as far west as like Albany, and that was kind of it.
You never made it to the West Coast, though.
Nope. Nope.
Um, you guys played a show with Parr at one point because I was working with Parr and I remember that. Where was that? Was that? I thought that was in the
In Europe.
South, but it couldn't have been because
No,
do you
was a
remember the
festival in
show?
Europe. It was a festival in Europe. Yeah, it
Oh, it
was
was in
like,
Europe.
yeah, we also played with Treppan and Pal at that show. And I was actually psyched to play with both bands, but it was one of those things that started at like noon in like the hills, the farmlands of Germany. And so even by 2 o'clock, everyone's trashed, and you have like this sea of people. I don't know, could have been 5,000 people. I have no idea, but it was a massive amount of people. And by the time we hit the stage, like people were really riled up. It was one of the best shows we've ever played. It was incredible. And guy from Treppen and Powell was talking to us after the show. He's like, "Nice, good job," And I was like, "I love those Treppen and Powell records." Felt like a nerd. It was great.
Yeah, I never had a dull moment with Paw. They were like just the
Oh yeah,
craziest band, man. We thought they were
incredible
going to be a
record.
lot huger than they were, but
It's
it
a great
didn't.
record.
The second record didn't happen, unfortunately.
No.
Um, in 1996, Innocence came out, and
Mhm.
I don't know. I do a lot of research, and I read somewhere that you guys had a $35,000 budget on
Mhm.
that record. Where did you make that record? That's what I didn't write down.
So we did it at part at the New Fort when the New Fort came up, like
Was it
when
Tim
the
again?
yeah, it was with Tim again. Yeah,
So you
yeah.
liked working with Tim, and you went back to him.
Oh yeah, totally. But it was like we wanted to approach it differently. We definitely wanted to have it be more stripped down. We didn't want it to be as bright and metallic. I remember one of the arguments was about like the bass sound, and he's like, "Look, I don't want that clacky, Megadeth bass sound. We don't want to sound like that. Like, we want it to sound more like earthy and natural Sabbath, Zeppelin stuff." And they got into it because not that Tim wanted us to sound more metal, but he's like, look, okay, if we're going to do that, then we have to approach it in a different way. So it took longer. We did it in 20 days instead of 10 days, and that's recording and mixing. But that's also why the budget was larger. And the budget also included buying Erica like a new drum set. So I would say
Oh,
maybe 10 grand went into as a drum set.
so the sales must have been real good enough on the first record for them to give you a budget this size, because independent labels didn't have a lot of money back then.
Yeah, the first record was 10 grand. The budget for the first record was 10 grand. So they were like, okay, we know that we're going to support you and blah blah blah, and that's why we got that budget. But the band ended up breaking up before the record came out.
What happened?
Well, we just didn't get along at that point. It was like really difficult. Eric was not happy touring. He had a lot of health issues, and he did not want to really tour much. He just wanted to write music and go into the studio and stuff, which is understandable. And the style was not uh, our style was not really understood at the time. So if we were going to do something, like we had gone through a major label trying to buy us off Century Media, and that was traumatic for everybody. You know,
What label was that?
it was Collision. It was Derek Schulman.
Oh
So
yeah.
I think he worked at Mechanic, right? I think he came from Mechanic.
He's a Polygram guy, and they all
Okay,
I think he was at Polydor. Didn't he sign Bon Jovi?
I have no idea.
Derek Schulman? I think he did. I could be
Okay,
wrong, but
so
that's a
Collision at the time was the only thing they had was a Jesus Lizard live at CB's record, and that was their one release, and ours was going to be the second release. And then the Century Media message back to him was, well, yeah, sure, you can have the band, but you have to pay us $250,000. And he was like, there's no way that's happening. So, you know,
That
Okay,
happened a
bye.
lot around that time.
Yeah, yeah, bye, guys. You know?
There's several Boston bands that'll tell you that happened to them,
Hmm.
because that was the trend, you want
Yeah,
the band, pay the money.
yeah, exactly.
Um, so was it really sad for you when the band ended before you could really promote the second record?
I mean, I had expectations that that's what we're gonna do, and I was looking forward to it. But I also was like, all right. I mean, I have a bunch of lyrics. I'm just gonna keep going. Forget it. So I immediately started looking for people to play with. Ended up meeting up with the guys from Milltown, meeting up with the guys from Milligram. Milligram actually started first. Daryl and I started writing songs together first, but we couldn't find a drummer to regularly practice with. We had a couple people that tried out and stuff like that, and it kind of, we did some practices, but nothing long term. And so I went with Milltown, and then I got contacted by Larry Jacobson at Revolution.
I'm going to start with Milltown because I was
Mhm.
curious. I think Matt and Brian went to Berkeley. They both ended up having really good careers in the music business at this
I don't think
point.
Brian went to Berkeley. I think he's mostly self-study, but
Rob,
Matt went to
Rob Delaney, didn't do it, or just it was
no,
just Matt?
no, Matt went to BU.
Oh,
He
so
didn't
they
go.
just moved to Boston from
Yeah,
DC. Okay,
exactly. Yeah,
sorry. I
yeah,
don't know why I
yeah.
said Berkeley.
No, that's okay. Yeah, no, I mean, well, because they're both very accomplished producers, so it would follow that they had some training, but I think they mostly learned from friends and on the fly on their own, lots of trial and error. I know that Matt really got his start in New Alliance. That's where he opened his first studio.
Right. Um, I guess, I every time I talk to people from out of town and they formed in Boston, it seems like they always went to Berkeley. That's why I thought
Sure,
that
yeah,
happened.
understandable.
Um, Giant Records was it Giant, not the Giant I used to run, but it was the Giant that went through Warner Brothers. That's who eventually courted you guys?
Yeah, and it eventually became known as Revolution.
Yeah,
They actually,
Revolution.
yeah, and they had a big lawsuit with Revelation because of the confusion of terms there. But yeah, so it was Irving Azoff, Larry Jacobson, a few other people, and Larry was like, "Look, if you could just kind of keep this kind of quiet, so we don't have any sort of like other labels involved, that'd be great." Well, that didn't quite work out. People in the band got a little excited and brought some other people into the picture, and that was a little frustrating. But it was also because everyone was eager and really wanted to get this thing going. We wanted to share it with people and we wanted to get it out there, and we knew we had potential. And so when I was able to get everything back from Century Media, because I basically told him, you can let me go for a lot cheaper than you said before, or I'll just stop making music because I have a great job at Harvard. I don't need this. I don't need the aggravation. And they were like, okay, well, here's your publishing back. We just need this little amount of money. Wasn't much, and we were able to move on. So the Warner Brothers record we recorded in '98.
Wow, so you had done a publishing deal. That was pretty common back then too with independents. They always wanted half
Yeah.
the publishing.
Yep.
Um, so was Milligram kind of like put on hold for a little while you were doing Milltown? Because I
Yep.
know all these guys, Daryl, Zephyr Courtney's the guy you
Hmm.
ended up getting, and Jeff Turlick.
Yep.
Uh, I think Milligram's the band that I think once I told you it was Milltown I saw at the Linwood, but it wasn't. It was Milligram that I saw at
Got
the
it.
Linwood
Hmm.
more than once, I think.
Yeah,
This is
probably.
the Class War is the record I
Yeah.
had. So, because
Yeah.
I was
Yeah. Nice.
checking it out, it was an excellent record. And those
Nice. Nice.
guys were all really good musicians
Oh yeah,
too.
totally. Yeah, we started with Bob Maloney on bass, another amazing musician. Like, and then we got Jeff later. But it was so we did two different records. The first record, Hello Motherfucker, was with Bob, and that was like it was basically two EPs. The second EP, it was kind of all recorded at the same time, but we put out the first EP because it didn't have like covers and stuff on it. And then we had a companion CD called a Black and White Rainbow that came with it. You could snap them together and stuff. It had like Misfits and Fear and um forget what else, Black Flag. But yeah, so making the Milligram records were really fun. We also worked with Andrew Schneider, and Andrew was just a beast, like incredible. He understood what we needed for grit and the brutality that we wanted with our rock and roll. We wanted it to be catchy, but we also wanted it to be raw and to have a bite in your headphones.
He is one of the heroes of the recording scene in Boston for that
Absolutely.
whole era. I mean, Mud Rock was there, but then Andrew Schneider kind of did. if you look at his catalog of records that he's
It's
done, it's
incredible.
just unbelievable, man. Just really, really
Yeah,
good.
yeah,
So, what happened with these both of them?
yeah,
Because tell me, Milltown and then Milligram, because I know Raw Radar War was after both of them, right?
yeah. Right after Milligram broke up. In fact, we started talking about it before Milligram fully broke up. But Milltown, we went and did a record. We went to Longview Farm, and that was a cool experience. But the major label process for making a record is very different. And they literally told us, this after we recorded almost everything, they were like, "Yeah, we don't hear a hit. This is the age of Smash Mouth, guys." And we're like, "Okay, well, if that's the context, then no, we're not that band."
And you were
So
done with them.
yeah, it was like, this is ridiculous. Come on. I went back to my job at Harvard. I'm set. Um,
Can I
then
can I interrupt you for a second?
yeah,
Because I
go
don't know
for
why I wrote this down. I wrote what happened with Toby Wright. I
it.
mean,
Yeah, that he was the engineer on that record.
yeah, what happened? Didn't something happen?
I mean, he basically he was working with the label. He had to be working with the label. He's thinking about his future projects. So he was real kind to us, nice, blah blah blah. Let's make this record. And then when they were like, "We need you to stop mixing because we don't want to fulfill the contract. We don't."
Oh,
Yeah, and he was like, "Okay." So he only barely mixed 10 of the songs. We recorded 16 to 18 songs, and he only barely mixed 10 of the songs, and then said, "Okay, we're done." And
so
then he wanted
basically, he was in cahoots with the label, and they didn't think this was going to work, and that's what put
someone
that's
at the
what.
label, yeah, said, yeah, shut
Yeah.
it down. But they had to fulfill the contract, so he did just the roughest mix possibly could, and then he wanted his full fee. And I was like, really, dude? Like this is insane. He got paid 65 grand for that. That's what he was asking, plus points.
Wow.
Yeah,
Wow. And I
yeah,
couldn't tell you another record he worked on, but I'm sure there were a
exactly. Yeah,
couple good ones in there somewhere.
yeah,
But
exactly.
I can't remember them.
Yeah.
So, okay, so you went through the mills and
Hmm.
then had you already started your record label by then, or was this years later? Tractor 7 was your label, right?
So Tractor Seven basically we formed Tractor Seven right towards the end of Milligram, because Milligram had this record in the can that we wanted to put out, and
Yeah.
it we did that, Lamont and Crash and Burn as the first three records, and we were really happy, like just perfect alignment with friends, and the dudes in all three bands were we didn't necessarily always all play together or anything like that, but like we got along with each other, and I appreciated that they were hardworking, that I loved the Milligram record and I wanted to get it out. So yeah, we did some special packaging and all those, and then we started to talk to more people and kept the label going a little bit. We put out a really awesome compilation, which I wish I still had 100 copies left because I just to be passing them out still.
It must have lasted a little while because Black Helicopter ended up with you guys,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, that was one of our favorite releases on that label. So they had this really cool concept of making a little diorama out of their CD case. So we went over, and it was the first night I ever had Lafroig. We sat with glue guns, X-Acto knives, and cut out all these dioramas that were their CD covers and put them all together by hand, like the band and the label. So me, Mike Cahill, Mario Travers, all the band members, we all just sat there and enjoyed it. And we did it at their old studio, Analog Divide.
Mario, I went to the tribute they had for Mario.
Yeah,
Black
appreciate that.
Helicopter was on fire that
So
day.
good. Yeah,
Yeah, King of
incredible.
Wormtown is probably one of
Oh,
my favorite songs. I mean,
great.
really, I'm
That
trying
whole
to get,
record has it's incredible.
yeah, I'm trying to get Tim to come on my show. It's going to happen eventually because
That's great.
he went to Framingham State and worked at
Yeah.
WDJM, and I was there before him, so we have that
Okay.
kind of DJM connection.
Nice. Nice.
Um, I'll just fast forward here to Northern Skulls, which I almost
Oh yeah,
forgot
sure.
all about because you
That's okay.
guys put this EP out, and then the pandemic came, and that just completely
Yeah,
screwed everything up. But
that's all
still,
right.
Glenn was on, and he
Yeah.
talked about it. Is
Nice.
Northern Skulls just done, or
I mean, we never officially like broke up or anything like that, but it was just like I wasn't feeling it. After Mario passed away, I really didn't want to make music anymore. And
mm,
so I was in
yeah?
Northern Skulls at the same time I was in Radar War. And I was just really just bummed out. And I'm feeling better about it. But then now I got, life is different once you stop playing music because you don't have that infrastructure in your life. And I'm not opposed to making more music, but it's certainly lower priority. I love those guys, though. The Northern Skulls guys, just awesome friends, and I love that record. We were supposed to do a second record actually with Steve Albini, and we had time booked
Yeah.
during the pandemic, and then he passed away after that. So like that isn't going to happen. But we did talk about the possibility of possibly, if we were going to do it, we might do it with Andrew Schneider. That would have been cool.
Nice. He's down in Brooklyn now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, well, are you like, I know you got the art career going, which is great.
I like painting, but it's not. This isn't my painting, by the way. This is a painting by a Ukrainian artist, and it's actually just you can see the tanks.
You'll have to go on YouTube, folks, if you're listening to see what he's talking about. Well, I do art myself, and we never plan on making a career out of it, but I like to say we're artists and we have a career. We
Sure,
both
sure.
have had shows at New Alliance Gallery, so
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
and you still work at Harvard.
No, I haven't worked at Harvard since well, a long time ago, since 1998, 99.
Oh, okay. I worked there from 2000 to 2005 while I was managing bands. I was in the molecular cellular bio, I can't even say it,
Nice.
biology program. I was an administrative assistant, and
Cool.
there were a lot of perks to working in Harvard.
Exactly. Yeah.
We all thought the charms were going to become a household name, and I quit my job, and it didn't
Uh,
happen. But
Great band
that's
though.
life. That's life, man.
Yeah.
So what's going on? Okay, you just reissued. Did you do those yourself? The two
Nope.
reissues?
No, it's a guy named Tom B. Tom, he has worked at labels for a long time. He's done a lot of graphic art. He's done a lot of very famous album covers. And the most recent thing he did before this that is probably noteworthy in this scene is like the Quicksand Slip reissue. So that was like
Oh,
the 30-year reissue. So he brought all the like sort of ephemera together to do the inserts and stuff. He made sure that it, was top quality, and the vinyl release, like he designed it. So he's starting a record label now, and the Witness reissues are the first two on his label.
nice. On vinyl. First time on vinyl for both of them?
No, no, we've had a few different pressings of Promotal Form on vinyl, but this is the first time that Innocence has ever been released as its own record. Like so, all the layout is sort of a reconstitution of what we initially planned, but it's in black and white. It's I think he did a beautiful job. He we worked together. Initially, it wasn't supposed to have any color. It was supposed to be kind of the opposite of the first record, where the first one's very colorful. The second one's supposed to be just black and white. So in this one, we made it monochromatic. It's not completely black and white, but it is monochromatic for the most part, and it looks really great. But the insert is beautiful. Some of the artwork came from the original printing of Paradise Lost, which I had access to from working at Harvard, in the rare books library. So it's like a beautiful, huge tome of just old beautiful paintings and illustrations. But long story short, it looks great. His label's kicking off now, and he's also going to do the Milltown reissue, which it's not even a reissue. It just never came out before.
Wow, that's
The lost
cool.
the lost album from Longview Farm.
Excellent, man. Excellent. Um, Do you listen to a lot of music now? I mean, what are you
Yeah.
getting? Because you have a great knowledge of all that you mentioned so many bands, and I can appreciate that. What's catching your ear these days?
That last Lola Young record is pretty incredible. I saw her at Sinclair, and she was amazing. But I listened to a lot of aggressive stuff, a lot of jazz, but it's also just a matter of digging through and finding cool records at rare locations. I recently got a copy of the John Wayne record. That was pretty awesome. I was psyched about that. Texas Funeral. Yeah, it's great.
Wow.
Yeah, Trio. I'm just looking around my room here.
So
I
you have
got
a
a
lot of
cop.
vinyl?
Yeah, I have a lot of vinyl. Yeah.
Yeah, me too. It's
There,
a disease.
it's okay. It works, man. There's a six going on seven reissue, which just came out on Death Wish. That's really awesome. What else? I got a copy of the Wailing Ultimate on vinyl. That's
Oh,
great.
wow.
Yeah,
Homestead
yeah,
compilation. Wow, I
yeah,
remember that record. It's on vinyl, huh? Oh yeah, it
yeah.
came out on vinyl originally, I think.
It's so good.
Did Matador reissue it? Is that how you got it?
No, it's an original one. I got it from a Discogs dude. I got
Surprised
that.
Gerard hasn't reissued that on. I
I was really
remember when
happy.
that came out, Big
Yeah, me
Dipper
too.
and
Yeah,
Volcano
exactly.
Suns, and there's a lot of cool bands on
Yeah,
there.
even the dinosaur song on there is awesome.
Yeah,
Like, um, and then like I also listen to a lot of stuff just on YouTube because my girlfriend and I we always like go down sort of these click holes, and she's from Ukraine. She grew up with a lot of
I
Russian
love your
influence.
girlfriend. I've met her. She's
Yeah,
nice.
she's cool. Yeah, and so she's always playing stuff to me from her like childhood, like what she grew up listening to, and also we try to follow a lot of the more contemporary bands that are um, especially politically active in the current climate. And it's funny, we were hanging out with Poundy and Pete and a few people over at the Middle East, and Dave Unger walks over and he goes, "Oh, there's a hip hop group playing downstairs and they're Russian." And she's like, "What? There's a Russian rap group playing downstairs?" So of course she knows who they are, right? And it's $100 to get in because they can't advertise the show. They couldn't take credit cards or anything like that. They could get into a lot of trouble. Like Putin would probably send people after them because they're completely anti-Putin and anti Lukashenko from Belarus. But they're called Costa, and they have this video that's just so brutal about the actual brutality, the political brutality of people going out to protest and then getting beaten to death, you know? And so we watched this video. We're like, oh my God, it's incredible. We watched it. We've played it for so many people. Come to find out they're playing the Middle East downstairs. Oh my God, we're just blown away. It was
Did you
like,
get in?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Did you
It
have
was,
to pay 100, or did
yeah, it was
somebody?
$100 each. Yeah, no, but I mean, at that point,
Wow,
I'm like, they couldn't even sell merch or anything like that, right? So just facilitate them traveling in Western countries,
that's
in a
nice
way
of
that
you,
works for
man.
them. But they were awesome. They were super like chill, super kind to her. She talked to him for a while and stuff. And yeah, that's the kind of thing that in today's climate, if you can find people that are actually going through struggles and can bring their life to the stage in a way that will change other people's lives because it shows that it's okay to stand up for your beliefs, that means a lot to me.
You mentioned today's climate, and I guess I should mention that it's November 4th when we're talking here today,
Yeah.
right now,
Yeah.
and tomorrow's the day. But fingers
Yeah, big deal.
crossed. I don't know what else to do. I voted. I know I voted for
Yeah,
the right person, but
same here. Same here.
um, thanks a lot, Jonah, for
Yeah,
coming on,
absolutely, man.
man. Really
I
appreciate
appreciate
it.
it. I can't thank you enough, man. Steve, it's been a long time. Remember talking to you the first time I met you? Like it seems like yesterday, but now
That must have been around 98, I think, when I moved back to
yeah,
Boston. I remember you
yeah.
guys playing the Linwood,
Had to be the
and
Linwood, yeah.
yeah, definitely. All
No.
right, dude. Thanks, man.
Thank you very much, man.
All
Talk to you
right.
soon.